All right, everybody. I think we're gonna get started here. There's still a couple more kiddos filtering in, but we'll kind of set things up and welcome more high school sailors as they pop in. I'll just reintroduce myself again. My name is Alec McKee. I'm the race team director at the Lake Minnetonka Sailing School, and so I've been excited about organizing this event in conjunction with a couple of the other local sailing schools in Minnesota. So thanks. I see Ted on here and Karen. So thanks guys for helping me pull this together and provide panelists. So really the goals here, as we all know, we're stuck doing a lot of virtual talks right now. And so wanted to put out some content for everybody that was fun and engaging during these interesting times. And so the goal here is sort of to provide more knowledge for high school sailors around college sailing. And really look at some stories from people who are involved in college sailing right now and getting that information to high school sailors. We also want to inspire those high school sailors and you know, if they're kind of on the edge about, I don't know if college sailing is for me, you know, just give them more information and maybe, you know, a friendly face to where they're feeling inspired to take that next step. And then just kind of creating some community and some connections that can help kids if they have further questions or if they're interested in a specific team, where they could pick one of our panelists maybe and go directly to them and say, hey, I'm really interested in this team, and so something like that. So just some logistical notes here. So we've got this Zoom call is live streaming to YouTube. So looks like we're at around 30 participants, but if we go above 100, people will start being pushed to YouTube. That video will be published immediately, and so we'll send that out to our directors so that people can review this video after the fact as well. We have 7 panelists today with us. So we have 2 from Wayzata Sailing, 1 from Minneapolis Sailing Center, 2 from the Lake Minnetonka Sailing School, and 2 from the White Bear Sailing School. So my goal, I have a list of questions here for our panelists. And so what I would like to do is sort of go through in pairs. And so maybe have 2 to 3 participants, 2 to 3 panelists, excuse me, answer each question. So that we can move through relatively quickly and cover a lot of content. So that I'm hoping to take about an hour with that section of questioning, give or take, and then kind of leave the last 15 minutes or so for any student questions that arise. I also want to open it up to at the end for panelists if they have questions for other panelists to ask those at the end too. So panelists, if you think of anything, or if there's just something that I missed, please feel free to bring those details up at the end. So we can go ahead and get started here. I think the first thing I'd like to do is just if we could go around and have the panelists introduce themselves. So just state your name and then the university that you attend and the year in school that you are at. And then maybe just tell us if you're on a club or a varsity college sailing team. And maybe we can start with Wayzata Sailing.
Sure, I can go first. My name is Samuel Bartel. I'm a junior on the University of Wisconsin sailing team. What were the other questions, Alec?
Let's see, just your year, and then, if you're a club or a varsity team.
Oh yeah, and we are a club sailing team.
Yeah, I'm Walker. I also grew up sailing at Wayzata. I sail for Clemson University in South Carolina, and then we're also a club team, and I'm a freshman.
Thanks, Walker. We can move to Minneapolis Sailing Center.
All right. Hi, I'm Anastasia Sikala, and I'll be a junior this fall at Western Michigan University, and we are a club team. And I sailed at Minneapolis Sailing Center, obviously.
Thanks, Anastasia. How about LMSS?
Hi, I'm Annika. I'm a freshman at Roger Williams University, and I sail on the varsity sailing team.
And I'm Austin Haig. I'm in my 4th year. I'm just finishing my 4th year out of 5 at the University of Michigan, and we're a club team.
Cool. Thanks, Austin. And last but not least, White Bear.
Hi guys, I'm Olivia Starrock. I'm a senior at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I sail on a club team.
Hi, I'm Kate Cox. I sail for Hobart William Smith, the varsity team there. And I'm a senior.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody. So we've got some pretty cool panelists, really interesting people. So I think we'll jump right into some questions. So I want to start with our 2 panelists from Wayzata. And my first question for them is, why did you choose your team specifically that you're on? And did that varsity or club aspect have anything to do with your choosing?
I think that the club or like varsity aspect definitely played a role at first for me. Initially, I was looking at a lot of schools like out east, such as like Brown, Bowdoin, Charleston, Eckerd, and some other schools around like the Boston area, like Tufts. And initially, I was very, very set on going to a full-on varsity team, or at least like a school like Brown that was club and had a lot of resources. But what kind of changed it like for me was I love the Midwest. It's a great place to sail. And so it has a lot of great people in the Midwest. They're all very, very nice. And it kind of felt like it was a place that I was comfortable already. And although I love competing out east and I love a lot of great competition, it came down to that as well as like the money aspect. Because for Wisconsin, or like for Minnesota residents going to school in Wisconsin, they're able to get reciprocity. So you get in-state tuition going to Wisconsin, which is very, very, very nice. So I'll be graduating with a lot less debt by going to Madison than I would have if I'd gone to somewhere out east. And I think that was probably the biggest factor for me.
Yeah, I know. I looked at a couple varsity teams, but I was really happy to find like a club team. Clemson, we're club, but we're like a pretty competitive club, if that makes any sense. And I wanted to get out of the Midwest, kind of the opposite. I wanted to go far away. And I looked up east, but I found Clemson in South Carolina, and we sail on an inland lake, kind of like the size of Minnetonka. And it just like felt like a good fit. I got to practice with the team when I visited as a junior, and I just kind of like fell in love. And that was what was a big deal for me. It was just like, it's a really good atmosphere, like a good group of peers to like sail with and get to know as a freshman. Like I came in already knowing a bunch of people just because I'd gone out with the sailing team and knew some people on it.
Nice. Yeah, that's really cool to hear. And I think, right away, oftentimes the biggest factor that people consider when thinking about college sailing is club and varsity, and there can be some big differences. And so my next question for our MSc and LMSS panelists would just be, again, remind us, are you club or varsity, and what's a typical practice like for you?
All right, so I go to Western Michigan and we're a club team. And so our team doesn't have a coach. So technically our typical practices are all just student led, and we kind of just work together on what we think we need to focus on for the next regatta. So it's a lot of just kind of practicing like mark roundings and all that. So ours is more student led, so we don't really have a structured practice like I know a few other teams do. But typical practice, like we meet up at the wreck and we all carpool together to the lake, which is like 30 minutes away, rig up the boats and get on the water for as long as we want to. Usually it's around like 2.5 hours, and then go back in. So it's pretty relaxed. So, but it's also really focused on what we feel like we need as a team together.
Michigan is also a club team. I think it probably falls somewhere between Western and varsity teams in terms of like the level of structure. And I think when I was choosing schools, I thought that for sure, like having a ton of structure was like really important. and that it was a bad thing if you didn't have a varsity coach. I think there's definitely pros and cons, and I think the cons are pretty obvious. Like having a less formal coach. Michigan has usually 2 or 3 coaches, but they're grad students who usually came from varsity programs in undergrad. But some of the benefits of not having a formal coach are, I think you can take a lot more initiative as a student, and like having it be more student run, I think has been really rewarding and fun for me. Like I was a captain of Michigan for a year, and I felt like I could have a lot of impact on the team because it's student run. And I think a lot of the students, even if they aren't on the e-board, feel that way. So it definitely, like that, the structure for me is helps the team feel a lot closer. I mean, I can't speak for a varsity team because I haven't been on one, but I know it's been a really good balance for me. Like I really enjoy that practices are fun and meaningful. So that's been great. A normal practice, to answer the question directly, usually it looks a lot like a high school practice at Minnetonka. We talk about our plans before we go out with our coaches. Usually they'll make a drill plan for us. And usually we have themes on a weekly basis. So we'll be focusing on boat handling for a little bit and then focus on strategy or whatever. So we have a drill list before we go out. We do a briefing, go out, run through the drills. There's usually 12 boats on the water. In the Midwest, the downside is it gets freezing, as you all know. So practice attendance dwindles off a little bit as the season gets colder, and in the spring, it just turns into the most committed members who are always going. I think that's another pro and con of a club team is often you can opt in a little bit more rather than being required to go. So if you're looking for like balance with other things, you might have more flexibility with other commitments if you're on a club team. But it's expected of Michigan sailors that if you aren't going to a practice, you have like a formal reason not to be, and usually that has to be academic. But the way we work is you commit to a certain number of practices a week. So we have practice Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And at the start of the semester, if you're serious about competing and traveling, especially the East Coast, then you're basically expected to sign up for all 3. But some sailors prefer just to sail on Friday. They know that means they probably won't go to any high level competitions, but that's just a trade-off that they wanted to make in college. So for us, it's once you've committed to a certain number of days, you're fully expected to go to every practice for those days, and every practice has a lot of structure and intent. But I think it's definitely less structured than a varsity team would be.
Awesome. And Annika, maybe we could hear from you too on kind of what a typical practice is like over at Roger Williams.
Yeah, so we have a varsity team, so our practices are a lot more structured. We, depending on the season, either fall or spring, we'll work on more fleet racing in the fall and then team racing every day in the spring. And so for the fall, we'll usually show up, get a rundown of what the practice plan looks like, get our pairings, rig up, and then we'll usually go out, do some boat handling, do some speed work, and then go into starts and then a few races at the end. And then some days we'll have OYO, which is on your own boat handling. So you can communicate with your skipper or crew what you want to work on as a team, which I think is really nice for like 5 to 10 minutes at the end of practice. So yeah.
Great, thanks. So I'm hearing a little bit that there's, even within these 3 panelists, there's some differences in how these practices are run. So I think that's cool to note. So my next question is also kind of around like a weekly schedule. And so I want to pose this to the White Bear panelists that we have here. We hear a lot in college sailing how, especially on varsity teams, it almost feels like a full-time job to be on a sailing team, or vice versa, where a club team, maybe you're just hanging out a couple hours a week. And so I'd love to hear kind of what a typical week is like and what your schedule is like with regards to the team.
Yeah, so my team is also varsity at Hobart William Smith, and a typical week for us will be most likely workouts with the team 3 times a week, in the morning at like 7 a.m. And then we'll do workouts on your own the 2 other days of the week. And then your class schedule throughout the day. And then we have practice starting at 3 until around 6:30, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then Friday's our travel day, and then regatta Saturday, Sunday. And then we'll usually also have a team meeting on maybe like mental toughness or team racing or something like that about once a week. Yeah, so sometimes it does feel like a full-time job, but it's still manageable in my opinion.
And I'm on Wisconsin, which is a club team, and I think I've had like a little bit of a different experience because I've been captain the last 2 years, and like that in itself feels like a full-time job. But for the most part, our week is 4 practices a week that our like most committed members go to. That'd be like our nationals team, plus a board meeting for anyone that's on the executive board, and a weekly mandatory team meeting where we do like the updates for the week, any new policies that we have to go over, as well as a chalk talk. And so I'd say it's probably like 4 to 5 days a week, plus regattas on the weekend of time.
Awesome. So that's great to hear a little bit about kind of a typical schedule, and I heard a little bit about kind of regattas on the weekends, and we all know that that's a lot of the time spent in sailing is traveling on the weekends. And so maybe from our Wayzata sailors, we could hear a little bit about how often are you traveling to events on the weekends? How many events are you doing every season? What does that look like?
Walker, do you want to go for it?
Sure. I mean, so I sail in South Carolina, as I said, and then we kind of we can travel as far as Tennessee and Florida, but we usually keep it in like South and North Carolina. I've been to Florida twice this year. But and since we're a club team, it's kind of, you get to travel as much as you want. So if you want to go somewhere every weekend, you could probably go somewhere every weekend. But with school, a lot of times that's hard. So if you have a test, you don't have to sail that weekend if you don't want to, which is kind of nice on a club team. You get to kind of just decide when and where you want to go. But I know I like to like travel down to Florida, especially when it was like colder at school. Not really that cold, but I don't know. You kind of have the decision to go wherever you want to go. I enjoyed being able to travel, but I mean, it is a lot of driving, and it can be hard with schoolwork to like take a 10-hour drive on a weekend. So it's kind of nice to have the option.
And then for our team, University of Wisconsin-Madison, we also like do a lot of traveling. It can be kind of tough because if we do go to like East Coast events, like at Hobart or Charleston or somewhere else, then that's usually like a 15 to 17-hour drive. And we do usually like do those drives. We leave like Thursday night or very early Friday morning, and typically like get there around like Friday afternoon or evening, and then we drive straight back home after the regatta ends on Sunday. So it's a lot of driving, but it's definitely worth it because we're able to get to those like top tier events and still compete at a very high level. And also, like, if you don't want to go to those events like in the East Coast or somewhere else, there's plenty of other events in the Midwest. There's probably 1, 2, if not like 3 events every single weekend. There's lots of events like in Iowa and in Illinois, Michigan, and in Wisconsin too. So there's kind of like that option for everybody. And if you do like to travel, like I like to travel and compete, you can do that like a lot too. For example, like last week or last fall, we were gone for like 2 or 3 weekends for match racing. We went to Minnesota to train. We went to Sheboygan to like train. Went to Michigan for a qualifier, and then went to Marblehead, Massachusetts for like the nationals. So it can be like 4 or 5, 6 weekends of travel in the fall if you want. But it really is like up to what you want to do.
Sounds like a long van ride out to the East Coast for sure. Wow. That's great. So the next question that I want to talk a little bit about too is just wondering about practice venues. So it's pretty common in a lot of high school sailing, especially for our local sailing schools, where high school teams are paired up with sailing schools. And so, could we hear maybe from Minneapolis Sailing Center and LMSS a little bit about, is it the same setup with your team, or are you paired up with a yacht club, or is there a different setup?
Yeah, so Western Michigan is very fortunate to be able to sail out of Gull Lake Yacht Club on Gull Lake. And it's a beautiful lake, and they have a beautiful facility, and they're just really big supporters of us. So what we do is we pay a boat rental fee and like the facilities fee every spring and fall. So we pay that to be able to use their boats. They have 6 420s that we're able to use. We're able to take out their motorboats, use the facilities when we're having our regatta and stuff like that. So we just are partnered with them, and they're just really big supporters of us. And that's like a 30-minute drive out from our campus, and we all carpool to that lake and stuff.
At Roger Williams, we're fortunate enough to have our sailing center right on campus. It's fairly new. It was built in 2016, so it's really nice. And we have like all our boats there, and they even have like a little study area on the top floor, which is really nice and really quiet to study. So it's just really convenient for me to just walk down from class or like the dining hall just right to practice every day. So yeah, and we sail out of the Mount Hope Bay. So yeah.
Very jealous of that experience. Michigan is, we do have a facility, and really happy to have 12 new FJs that we sail with, which is great. So having high quality boats is awesome, but we do have to carpool to practice. It's about 25 minutes, depending on who's driving, could get down to 15. But it's a good, the way we sell it to people at Michigan is it's a good time to get to know your teammates. I do wish we didn't have to go so far. So I do think it's something, if you're seriously considering sailing in college, definitely at least look into how far you're going to be driving, because it does become a big part of your experience. Like when I practice 3 days a week, it's from 3 to 7:30, but we're only on the water for an hour less than that because it's 25 minutes there and back. So definitely something to consider. And then unfortunately, I have another thing I have to go for, so I'm going to hop off. But if anyone is interested in Michigan or wants to talk to me more specifically, I'm sure Alec can pass along my contact. And thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us, Austin. We'll see you later. Cool. So talking a bit more too about practice and how this works, and many of you know in college sailing there are some more specific tracks that you can get into, such as match racing, solo sailing. There's women's nationals, and so sometimes we have teams training just for that. And so I think moving to White Bear, I'd love to talk about what does that look like at your school? Is there a women's team that's training for that event? Is there a match racing team? How is that sort of broken up?
Yeah, so at my school we have a match race squad that practices in the early fall, because the match race season is very early in the fall. And they'll usually travel. I sail on Seneca Lake, and so they'll travel up to like Rochester, New York or something, and practice for that there. And then I've done the laser circuit in college. So that is also in the early fall, which you'll practice probably the first month and a half of school for that, and travel to the laser regattas during that time. And then I also was the women's A skipper on my team. So pretty much my focus was mostly on team racing, although our spring is heavily focused on team racing, but we kind of try to split it up as best as possible in the spring and get both, because women's sailing is only fleet racing at the moment, even though they're trying to add some team racing right now. So yeah, I think I wouldn't say you're all working towards different goals, because your objective at the end of the day is I think, to win a national championship, but you're all working towards maybe different forms of that goal at the same time.
Yeah, and at Wisconsin, we have a women's team as well that competes in mostly like interconference events. So those would be like on the East Coast or South. And like Kate said, they're competing for the women's fleet racing national championship. And then we also have a match race team that Sam is a part of, who's also on the panel. And he's being modest. He does match racing and co-ed sailing. But they practice in the early fall and then prepare for the national championship in like early November. And then we also have like a keelboat, like inshore program of like J22s and some like other fun boats that we said teams to go out and sail at like Navy 44s at the Naval Academy, or different boats at American Yacht Club in New York, or in Chicago. So our keelboat team kind of does a lot of different kind of stuff too, and they're some of our more local MCSA sailors as well.
Very cool. And I think what I'm hearing is that there's definitely a lot of opportunities for different boats and kind of different niches within teams. So I think that's neat. So transitioning a little bit, I think it's always interesting to hear on different college teams how the cultures can be really different, especially with varsity or club teams. So maybe we could move to Wyzetta and talk a little bit about, what's the culture like on your team? What's the atmosphere like?
The culture on our team is pretty awesome, actually. So although we are like a club team, it is still very, very competitive. I think that Olivia might have mentioned this, but we do have practices 4 times a week, as well as like workouts on your own 5 to 6 times a week. So the team culture, like in terms of that, is definitely one where everybody's pushing each other to really strive to be the best. Outside of that, a lot of us also live together too. Like I live with 4 or 5 other sailors, and I think Olivia did like most of her like college career as well. So like being so close to each other, obviously like there can be times when you get sick of each other, and I think that kind of happens on any team. But more so than that, I think that being able to like live with your best friends who love the sport that you also love is really, really special too. And I wouldn't like really trade that for anything, because being able to live with like the 4 or 5 other guys I've been living with last year has been awesome. Like we all come home from practice together, and we're able to talk about situations that have happened on the water that we want to like learn more about. And we're also able to like keep building off of each other's knowledge even like after practice. So it's one that you kind of like have to balance in terms of like making sure that you get time away from your team, because sometimes it can be too much. And I think that like if you're on a varsity team too and you're traveling with the same group of people every single weekend, it can happen too. But I've loved it so far. And in terms of like our culture, it's definitely one that I like wouldn't really trade for anything else.
That sounds awesome. I know I'm a little jealous of the Wisconsin team because you guys do both like racing and then social side pretty well. But that's kind of like at Clemson, we have a really split organization, if that makes any sense. We have 200 members on our team, but about 30, I guess, are actually racing members. The rest, we have a really large learn to sail program. So there's a lot of social aspects to the club, like social gatherings and tailgates and things. But then we also have 30 core sailors that like practice 2 days a week, and then travel basically every weekend. But I think that's like something that gets looked over a lot. I guess I didn't pay attention to it a lot when I was looking for a team to join in high school, is that a lot of these teams have like a social side to them. And like Sam was saying, like your teammates become your best friends. And then I don't know, there's like lots of opportunities to like get to know people within sailing. And then I know I took on this semester, I coached at Wyzetta last year, and then now I'm in charge of teaching new sailors, new like college students how to sail this spring and then next fall. And so like there's lots of opportunities, at least at Clemson, to both teach like new, like bring the sport to people that haven't gotten to experience it it before at college. I don't know. It's a lot of fun to like have both a really intense racing side and then a kind of laid back and like more social side of the organization.
Walker, I got a quick question for you in there. If you were a high school or if you had advice for a high school sailor, looking for a college team,
Mhm.
and if they were taking into consideration the social side of things, what would be the best route to look into the social or the culture, I guess, of a sailing team?
I don't know. For me, it was just talking to people. Like when you visit, don't be afraid to reach out to the team. More than just like the coach. If it's a varsity team, like talk to the captains. Like for me, I just like went out on a limb. I was a junior and I had never been on the Clemson campus before, and I just out of the blue emailed the team captains that I found their emails on a website, and then I went out and I raced with them. Like I went and I joined for a practice in khaki shorts. I went out and sailed an FJ for the first time and just like got to meet the race team, and they told me all about like what they do. So I guess just get in contact with the people, somebody on the team, and like they'll probably tell it to you straight, like what goes on. And I don't know, it's I can't speak for like varsity teams, but like I have friends from LMSS and NYZ that are on varsity teams, and like either way, like the people that you're with in sailing is like you're gonna get close to. But I guess just talking to a team, like trying to figure out like a dynamic of each team is really important when you're looking.
For sure. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I mean, just in terms of deciding on a college as well in general. So I like that, and maybe we could hear from our varsity team sailors here as well, a little bit in that same vein. So maybe Annika and Kate, if you could tell us a little bit about the culture on your teams, and if it's kind of similar to what we just heard, or if there are ways in which it differs at all.
Yeah, so I think one of the big things for me when choosing Hobart and William Smith was how competitive the team was, and I really liked that a lot. I wanted to be a part of a program where I knew I was going to get better, and I knew I was going to be challenged every day on the water and off the water, in like workouts and team meetings and things like that. And I think, like Sam said, we all live with each other too, and you become really close. And I think that's a big aspect of it as well, is you all kind of share the same interest, and then you're able to carry it off the water into other things, which was really important for me. So yeah.
Yeah, going off what Kate said, I would just agree that being on a varsity team, like I wanted to challenge myself and be just in a more competitive environment. So I think that's why Roger Williams was a great fit for me. Our team environment, I think, is a great balance between like pushing each other to get better on the water and off the water, and having that level of intensity, but also just loving the sport of sailing and having fun on the water.
That's great. And I guess my question would be, Sam was talking a little bit about how Wisconsin kids are living together and how they're, hanging out in the evening time. And is that pretty similar? Is there kind of a sense of tight knitness at your schools, or is that different?
No, I would say it's probably exactly the same. I mean, I think the people on your team become your best friends, like whether you like it or not sometimes. So, because you're just doing everything together, you have the same schedules, and you also have this collective passion, I guess is how you could put it. So, I think it's very similar to the Wisconsin team and what Sam was saying.
I would also agree with that. You're like all working towards one goal together, and you spend so much time with each other that you kind of end up being a close-knit community of sailors who are just loving the sport of sailing and doing and working together to achieve this goal.
Sure. Nice. Yeah. So that's cool to hear a little bit about the culture. in varsity and club teams. And I think one aspect of the culture can just be the coach, and the coaching that's present for your teams. And so my next question, maybe we move to Olivia and Anastasia on this one, is, well, I guess first of all, with a club team, just do you have a coach? I know some club teams don't. And if you do, what's your coach like? Uh, do you get along with them? How do they differ from maybe a high school coach?
So at my school, we do have a coach. So we only were like 1 year without a coach, and it was in like a weird transition period where our coach was promoted within the university and he took on another role. And then we were finding a new one. But for the last like year and a half, we've had Joe Kuchenreiter, who's one of our alumni, coach us, and he's also an All-American and like very successful college sailor from Wisconsin. And it's been super awesome to have him. He's like, it's kind of different than a high school coach because this is somebody that's like sometimes closer in age. So that's just like a different dynamic. And we also have an assistant coach that's only a year older than us. And like I sailed with him all throughout college. So that's a little different. And he's more of like in an advisory organizational role. But Joe is super helpful. He helps our practice captain, Sam is one of them, organize practices for the day, as well as travels with us to like our spring break training trip and nationals, wherever that may be, and like our qualifiers. But we get along super well. He's super funny. He's like pretty young, and like we all seem to mesh really well. So it's been really good.
Unlike Wisconsin, Western doesn't have a coach, so it's all student led. We do have an advisor though, since we are a club sport, and our advisor is actually a sailor. When he was in college, he sailed on the Western team, so he's really present and wants us to ask him for help when it comes to like practices, if we need help at our regatta. So he's really present with our team. But since we don't have a coach, the executive board really leads the team. So this past fall, I was voted in as president. So I am really in charge of planning the practices, teaching the new people how to sail. So I kind of take on the role as coach sometimes. And yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's kind of rewarding seeing everybody learn and progress throughout the season. And everybody just helps each other, even though we don't have a coach. We bounce ideas off. And then at regattas, we talk with other teammates and see like, oh, you're doing really well. What can we do better? And in the MCSA, the Midwestern Collegiate Sailing Association, everybody's really talkative and welcoming when like we're all needing help or just giving advice. Even if you don't have a coach, it's okay because everybody's there to help each other. So it's good there.
Sure. And Anastasia, I think that's really cool to hear about, since I think for probably most high schoolers on this call, that probably is a pretty unfamiliar role to be in. And so that's cool too, hearing a little bit about your role as in organizing some of these practices. I guess I'm just really curious too about kind of hearing more about how that works. So do you find yourself kind of hopping in a coach boat to go set marks and then you're back in the sailboat? Do you kind of go back and forth, or are you like only a coach for an entire practice? How does that work?
Yeah, so I took a lot of what I've learned in the summer coaching at MSC and applied it a lot to this fall. So I'll get in the coach boat and I'll just follow the 420 with the people, telling them what to do, and then or I'll like get in the boat with them and do kind of like instructor sailing, that's what we call it at MSC, and just kind of walk them through like tacking and all that. So it's really just kind of working closely and just kind of following them until they get the gist of it, and just continuously making comments so that they feel confident that they're like grasping the concept of sailing.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, I think that's really cool to hear about and really interesting. And so I think this brings us to this good point, talking a little bit about team organization, and noting how, with Anastasia's team here, a lot of the responsibilities are kind of lying on the students, where in a varsity team that might not as much be the case. So maybe we could move to Wayzata Sailing here and ask those guys, how are your teams organized? Are there roles within the team? Who's in charge of what? How is that decided?
Yeah, so Olivia, like, feel free to chime in if you want to. We basically have a executive board like runs the team, and they kind of like decide whatever happens like within the team. So Olivia, along with our other captain Peter, were the captains for the last year, and Olivia was the captain for the last 2 years. And they kind of under that umbrella is our executive board. So there's 2 practice captains who help organize and run practices, and they coordinate with the coaches in terms of like timing and skills and drills, all that kind of stuff. We also have like a media coordinator who does all of our social media, as well as like a merchandise chair who orders merchandise and team apparel, and a couple other miscellaneous board positions like fundraising and a secretary, and a recruitment coordinator. So there's a lot of different people within our team that have very specific roles. Um, and that makes it like pretty interesting because it puts students like myself who didn't really like have a leadership position in college into one. I was like the captain of my high school sailing team, but it's definitely different being with an organization in Wisconsin under the university.
Yeah, kind of to bounce off Sam, like our team, our coach only really helps us on the water. We are student run off the water. So as soon as we step off the dock and the chalk talk's over for the day, it's kind of on us as students to organize the team. We organize our own travel. Our advisor and assistant coach helps us with like following university policies, and like if we need new pennies, he helps us order them. But for the most part, it's um, myself and the other captain for like day-to-day stuff, and then our board meets every week and helps us organize for like Sam said, like fundraisers, recruitment, organizing our spring training trip, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so kind of like Wisconsin, Clemson's also a club team, but it's like I was trying to explain before, it's a really different dynamic because we have kind of 2 sides to the organization. We have a lot of people that are in it more for the social side of it. So it, in a way, we function almost as like a fraternity or sorority, like a social organization on campus, teaching people how to sail, but then also having social events and tailgates. Like Clemson football is obviously a big thing. But so like I actually fulfill 2 roles now. I'm so vice commodore, so I'm in charge of teaching kids how to sail, so new students, and that's kind of a different experience teaching 18-year-olds who'd never been on the water before how to sail. And then I also like I'm like the assistant captain, so I help run practices when our main captain isn't there. But like I was like trying to say, so there's kind of 2 sides. We have a lot of people that are involved in the organization and super involved and on our executive board and do a lot of things like organize merchandise and stuff, but don't necessarily sail competitively. And then we have our captain and co-captain that are completely race focused, and they organize going to regattas. Yet still a social sailor might be in charge of figuring out how to fund getting new boats and sails, even if they're not racing. So it's definitely like a different dynamic, but it's entirely led by students, which is really fun. I've gotten to, as like a freshman, take on a lot of new roles and leadership even in the organization, because it's you get out what you put in. For sure, in a club you're not required to do anything. You can put in as much as you want to get out of it, which is fun.
Yeah, and like kind of like going off of what Walker's saying too, I think that like although like varsity teams and club teams have a lot of resources, kind of like take that burden off the students of like doing a lot of things for the team. It is pretty cool to like be a part of that and know that like what you're doing makes the team go.
Yeah.
Because that's something that like in high school is kind of done with you or done for you by LMSS or by YZETA. It's like done by the coaches who work there and by the directors who work there. So it's something that you can like put on a resume later in life. Like post college, you can say that you were a captain of your team for 2 years or something, and that would look pretty good.
Nice. Yeah. So I'm hearing a lot of great things there, talking a little bit about some of the leadership roles that we can take on in these club teams. And maybe we could have Kate, if you wouldn't mind weighing in a bit on maybe how this might compare to your varsity team, if there are any big differences there.
Yeah, so I think they've all kind of touched on it a little bit, but with a varsity team, your main responsibility is pretty much just sailing. So I have a full-time coach, a full-time assistant coach, and then a part-time assistant coach, another one that we only have around for half the year. And so for us, it's really nice because we don't have to worry about things such as like Olivia and Sam have to worry about with like, how are we getting to a regatta, hotels, things like that are kind of out of our mind. We do have to fundraise a little bit, but not to the extent that they do. So I think it just depends on the type of experience you want when you're choosing that.
Sure, totally cool. So I think that's good to note for high school sailors, that difference there. So one thing that I'd love to hear too about, and we have about 10 minutes left until 8, and so I kind of want to wrap up my questioning by then and open it up for kids. And so these last couple just pertain a little bit to the transition between high school and college. And so just kind of wondering, what was that transition for you like? And would you have any advice for any sailors making that transition? And maybe we could move it to maybe Annika and Anastasia could tackle this one.
I guess one thing that's it's sailing related, but there's one thing that our coach really has emphasis on and that is fitness. And so I think coming into college sailing, just like working over the summer, like right before your freshman year of college, just like running or just going to the gym, I think that'd be really beneficial going into your first year, because I think that's something that coaches, especially in varsity teams, focus on a lot. So I think that would be one thing that's important to just know about before going into it.
I would say that, that's a difficult question, but for like going into a club team, just know that some club teams aren't going to be as serious as you expect them to be. You might be taken aback by how relaxed it is or how serious it may be as a club team. Like I definitely know that Wisconsin Madison's club team is a lot more serious than my club team, just because of who we get as sailors and just who we are. So when you're going into that, just kind of remember to be yourself. Don't think you need to act like the others around you. Just kind of know yourself as a sailor, what you want to be, and yeah, don't think you need to change yourself to fit in with everybody else on your team.
That's cool advice. And I think so this next question I would have for our White Bear panelists would be in a similar vein. What's one thing that you had wished you had known going into your college sailing career that you did not at the time?
I think for me, going out east was a little bit of a culture shock, kind of, because it's extremely competitive there, like I said before. So I'm not sure if that's something I wish I had known, but it's something I did learn very quickly when I got there, that the regattas are really competitive, and also that you're going to be really competitive with your teammates. And I think that's a big contrast when you transition from high school to college sailing, is that I think you need to be confident, but you also need to be humble at the same time, and make sure you're always like working for your team in whatever role you get placed in. Yeah.
And would you say that the competitive mindset, I guess, or what you're saying about competitiveness, do you think it's a higher level of competition, or do you think it's just people's attitudes are more competitive in a way? I don't know, or both.
I think it's a little bit of both for sure. I think one thing when you do go out east is that I learned is that everybody knows what sailing is there, and everyone has most likely sailed a 420 or an FJ before, and maybe even sailed in high school, but isn't going to try out for the sailing team there. So I think that makes it more competitive and almost more like respected in a way, which is cool because like on my campus, everyone knows who the sailing team is, which is pretty neat. And then also, I think it's just because you're in close proximity to a lot of other good, like top 20 sailing colleges. So you have that access like very close to you, which I think makes it competitive too in itself. So yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. Because yeah, around here people are like, what? Sailing?
Yeah, exactly. So that was one thing I actually really liked about going there is, I guess, not having to explain myself a little bit.
That's
So
cool. Yeah, that's interesting. Coming from Minnetonka, our mascot is the skipper.
right, yeah.
We're the real skippers, but nobody has any idea what we are.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Interesting.
And then I think at Wisconsin, we have, sorry, can you like explain the question again? I kind of got lost at some point.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, I was just curious if there's anything that you'd wished you had known going into your college sailing career that you didn't.
Yeah, so I think kind of going in, I wish I had known a lot more about team racing than I did in high school. I think I sailed at White Bear for the White Bear high school team, and a lot of it was we didn't have like enough sailors to make a full team race team. So we were like constantly doing like small drills or just like mark roundings for team racing. But then I got to Wisconsin and they were like, oh, like you know how to sail in high school. I'm sure you know how to team race. And I'm like, wait, just kidding. No, I don't. So I was like on like this fast track to learn how to team race right away. And that was a little bit stressful my freshman year. But I think the things you can do now, like reading up on the plays for team racing, just like a very basic knowledge before you eventually like decide to transition into a college sailing team. Understanding kind of like your goals, what each position does in a play, and understanding just like the general basis. And if you're going to want to do that, just because spring college sailing is really heavily focused on team racing.
Nice, and I think that's a really great point to sort of wrap up on here. So I just have one more question, and I just want to go through all of our panelists here. So maybe we just do quick 30 seconds for every panelist, but I'd just love to hear kind of what's been the highlight of your college sailing career and maybe one embarrassing moment, if you have any, that are worth sharing. Maybe we could start with Sam.
I guess I'll start off with the embarrassing moment. So first day of practice, freshman year at Wisconsin, we were basically like had a full-on race day. So everybody was like out in the water, and it was kind of like the time to start your stuff and show what you had. And I sailed with my friend Eric Sundberg, who I sailed with like a little bit in high school, and also goes to Madison. And we had a couple good first races. We got like a bullet, and a second and a third. And then in like race 4, we messed up going around like the word mark. We went around like the wrong way. And the coach Dave at that time was yelling at us to like go around a certain way, and we couldn't figure out what his pointing meant. And so we rounded the mark like 3 times. None of them were correct. And when we got back on shore, he had explained to me, who was a freshman and kind of like really new to the whole team, like how to round the mark. And that was kind of embarrassing because I'd done that a few times in my life. But it was like all very, very fun, and it was a good way to like get a good laugh and meet some new people on the team. A highlight for me, I think, would probably be last spring. We were sailing at Team Race Nationals and not really expected to like do that well. I think we ended up getting like 8th place overall, maybe like higher than that. I don't exactly like remember, maybe like 13th or 10th or something. But we ended up beating Jacksonville and Bowdoin towards the end of the regatta, which was pretty cool because they were expected to beat us by a long shot. And they were doing like a live stream online and commentating the race versus Bowdoin. And basically said like halfway through, well, it seems like Bowdoin's got this race like about like all wrapped up. And by the end, we'd pulled out like a 2-3-4 or a 2-3-5 to win it. So that was pretty cool.
That's a cool story, and I appreciate the Mark rounding tale too. It sounds like a character building moment. I just wanted to cut in as we're going around here, and for all the students listening in, I think this would be a good time to start thinking of questions to ask our panelists. So feel free, maybe just type your questions in our chat, and then I can call on you so that we can have a discussion. But to start thinking of those questions and putting them in the chat for us. Walker, do you want to go ahead and be next on this question?
Sure. I know one moment for me that was like kind of a big deal was making my first decision as like an executive board member. Like I wasn't used to getting calls from seniors and like 22-year-olds asking me questions about what they can and cannot do at the sailings, like at our center. And so it was just like a different experience, like having a whole leadership position where people were listening to me and like taking my advice so seriously. But then one really embarrassing moment was I mean, I grew up sailing in the Midwest, and I went to a regatta in Wilmington, which has insane current. And I had never sailed in current before. And I rounded the windward marking first and rounded the leeward marking last because I didn't know how to sail in current and was drifting all over the place. And it was a tough day of racing for me, not getting a big learning curve on learning how to sail in a different environment, but it was fun.
I had a quick
Nice.
question for any of the panelists, I guess. How are you guys sailing, or are you not sailing with the COVID-19, or what's the organization look like currently?
The season was canceled pretty early on. I think like March. I think the date was March 13th. Actually, is when they canceled it. Yeah. So no, no one's sailing.
No sailing. Is there any Zoom, anything, any virtual attempt at learning, or?
We've been doing weekly Zoom meetings. They just ended though, because I guess our season would have been ending around this time. But that's all we've been doing up to this point.
Yeah, we've been
Um,
doing some virtual stuff, like Sam organized a few, but Sam, you can touch on who you brought in.
yeah. So like Olivia was saying, we've been doing some Zoom meetings recently. We had our first one today with Augie Dale, who won COVID Nationals last year. We've like reached out to a bunch of local and like not local sailors who can help us out and do some Zoom meetings. So we haven't been able to like get on the water. I think we had like 2 events this spring, or no, 3 events like this spring. So we had a little bit of sailing time in then. But going forward, I think we have finals next week, and then after that, we've got basically 2 weeks of Zoom meetings with some cool people. We've got like Steph Roble and Taylor Canfield coming in, as well as like Dave Perry and Nick Baird, who was the College Sailor of the Year last year. So we've got a lot of cool panelists to come talk to us and help us out. And it is pretty interesting too, because like with COVID going on, there are a lot of coaches who are more open to doing chalk talks for tons of different organizations.
For sure. Yeah, they're not busy. That's cool. Is there any laser sailing going on? Is that off limits? I guess it kind of depends state by state, but I'm curious if the lasers are getting out and practicing, or if it's allowed, or.
I know in Wisconsin, like some of our laser sailors have been like taking their personal boats out. It's just a matter of like we can't use any club boats right now anywhere.
Sure. The organization's like not involved, kind of cool. Trying times for the sports community.
And maybe that's a good point here to kind of discuss is, you know, as college sailors, some of you leaders on your team, what advice would you have for these high school sailors who are currently not able to get on the water in the full capacity? You know, how can you stay positive during these interesting events that are happening? I'll just open this up to anybody.
I guess I'd say just like try to get outside and stay healthy. Don't be sitting around too much. I know that's probably what everybody's saying about everything, but like even just like going and walking around or going on a run, doing a home workout, whatever cheesy crap, but like just trying to stay as active and moving as possible is gonna help you like feel more comfortable once you eventually are able to get back in the boat.
That's great advice. I've definitely found that after a long day outside, I feel significantly better than if I'm cooped up inside for the whole day. Or get out and work on a pontoon for 5 hours a day. That's what Alec and I have been doing.
Yep. Cool. So I'm not seeing any student questions yet. I might be calling on my kids here in a little bit just to get them going. But I think we were going through a highlight and an embarrassing moment. I just really want to hear all of the panelists' embarrassing moments. So maybe we could keep going on that. I think Annika, would you want to have fun with
Sure.
this one?
I think a highlight for me, I've only had a full season under my belt so far being a freshman, but just being able to sail around the East Coast and travel every weekend has been great, and I've loved it so far. And then also I've met some of my closest friends in the sailing team, and I've loved the environment of it, so that's been really great. Embarrassing moment, I don't know if I can think of a good one right now.
That's embarrassing. No.
Yeah.
You're just a freshman, so I'm sure.
Yeah,
something will come up.
I'm sure something will come along in the future, but
Yeah.
right now I don't got any good ones for you.
Austin, what about you, Anastasia?
Let's see. A highlight would probably be last spring season. It was a regatta in Michigan, and University of Minnesota's team was there. And I know some of you know Carl Eaton, and I actually beat him in a race. So now I kind of hold that over his head all the time when I see him and Michael Stone. I'm like, ha, yeah, I beat Carl in a race. So I kind of like to hold that over him. So that was a highlight for me. And then I don't really have an embarrassing moment. I don't know. I'll share a low light though, because that was kind of embarrassing on my part, was that I got a concussion getting hit by the boom tacking as a skipper. And everybody knows the boom's above your head. I just didn't duck in time. So then I got a concussion. So everybody always asks me, how'd you get that? I'm like, I forgot to duck. So that's kind of embarrassing. But yeah.
No, that's a great one. Super. It's a common one too. It's happened to me. What about our white bear panelists?
I think I probably have a lot of embarrassing moments. But I guess I tipped the first day of practice ever at tryout, so that was pretty embarrassing. And I think my highlight would be my sophomore year. I was the B division on the women's team, and we podiumed at nationals. So I think that was my highlight.
I think my highlight of college sailing was last year, kind of what Sam said. We had like a really good day at team race quals and beat Jacksonville and Bowdoin, and they were like super frustrated because they were definitely supposed to be beating us. Or when my skipper and I won a race in A division of co-ed nationals, which was super fun. My most embarrassing moment was probably anytime my skipper was crewing. Like we would do crew races, and he was 6'2", and so like he just like didn't fit in the front of the boat very well, and so he looked like super awkward and like gangly in the front. And our coach made us sail on like a super windy day, and it was really puffy. And we were jibing, and I like death rolled, and we almost like completely both got concussions like 3 days before we were supposed to leave for Rhode Island for nationals. So not super great on a crew skippering.
I relate to the feeling cramped in the front of the boat. I'm 6'4", so it snaps to that. Great. Well, thanks guys for going through that. I see we have our first student question, and it's from Max Siegel. Max, would you want to hop on video and ask it to the team here?
Sure. I just wanted to ask like how the competition has changed when going from high school sailing to college sailing. I don't know who to ask, or depending on like which region you're in, if you're like out east or still in the Midwest.
Okay, I'll comment on the Midwest. So when I had my first regatta in college, I was like, oh wow, people are really chill. So I was like, I want to protest this person. But my crew was like, Anastasia, do not do that. We don't do that really in the MCSA. So it really depends on who you're kind of sailing against. So in the Midwest Sailing Association, we're kind of separated a little because there's a lot of teams that are in Michigan and Ohio that are not as competitive, don't have a lot of sailors that are new people, but then we have like Wisconsin Madison, Marquette, and they're kind of more competitive. So it really depends on who's going to the regattas that you're at. So it kind of differs, but you will realize what teams those are, which are more competitive or not, and it all depends on where you're traveling. So I don't know. The Midwest is kind of separated. I don't know if Sam or Olivia want to comment on that, but it's still fun because you're all still sailing and trying to win. So
That's funny.
Yeah, I
Don't
think
protest him. How do you passive aggressively protest someone in Minnesota?
I don't know.
I think that Wisconsin is a little bit different, or at least I had a different experience personally. Just because I think that we are like really fortunate that we are able to travel to interconference regattas. And that competition is kind of the only that I guess we do more interconference and MCSA because our team is so big. So we have to split it by who goes to what regattas. And the difference coming from the Midwest and sailing out east feels like very, very large, I think, because kind of what Kate was talking about, like everyone knows what sailing is on the East Coast, and they definitely did a sailing summer camp at one time in their life. So everyone is very good, went to very good sailing high schools or boarding schools, and very competitive. So it's kind of a culture shock, I think, at first. And there's definitely ways to prepare for it, but just I think coming in really humble and keeping your expectations a little bit lower than you were if you were going to like sail at like a high school event in the Midwest. It's just a little bit different. Boats finish like within like 30 seconds to a minute of each other. Everyone's rounding at the same time. Like there's not big gaps in fleets like you see in high school because everyone is just like on top of the game all the time. So that's what my experience has been. I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in.
I would agree with that too. I think that like Max, if you ever have a chance, like go to like any like Crescent Nationals or any high school or like summer sailing nationals, you should definitely try to, because like what you get at like those events is they're very, very hard, and like high school nationals is definitely pretty tough, whether it's in like the laser or the 420 or FJ. But like the main difference, what like I think is that like if you take the top 5 boats or like top 5 teams at each of those nationals, that's like what you have for every single team at like a co-ed national qualifier or something. So like when we would travel to Newport last spring, there were 2 fleets of 18, and that kind of like you use those fleets to qualify into like the finals for co-ed sailing. And I would say that like each team in both of those qualifying divisions was phenomenal. So if you take like the top tier high school sailors and put them in one division, that's kind of like what it is if you're looking for that really high level of competition. It's definitely tough.
I think it really depends on like where you are in the country, I guess, because even within SASA, so we're like the Southern Collegiate Sailing, we like the northern part, so like the Carolinas where we are, we have NC State and Tennessee and Wake Forest and Chapel Hill. It's pretty laid back, and you're going to get skippers who started sailing in college, but then when you go against some of the varsity schools like College of Charleston or some schools in Florida, you're going to get some really high caliber sailors, maybe sailors from Spain. I know we sail against some kids from Spain and that go to Jacksonville, or like potential Olympic sailors at Charleston. So like you get a really wide range in college. I know in like the Northeast, it's all really competitive, but depending on where you go, you're going to get some really new sailors and maybe some less competitive events. But if you want to go to those competitive events, you can be against the top of the top sailors like in the world.
Cool. Well, we got some different perspectives on that question. So thank you for asking that, Max. I'm not seeing any more student questions. I'm wondering, not to put you guys on the spot, but Karen or Ted, I see you guys on here. I'm wondering if you have if there's anything I might have missed or anything you think would be good to have these guys talk about.
I don't have any specific questions, but I just want to thank you and the panelists for putting this together and the time. I was hoping we'd get our whole team here, but I think we have our kids that are focused on college sailing, which is great, and thank the kids did show up. So thanks everyone for putting this on.
Yes, thank you, Alec and Ted, for organizing all of this. We've been so fortunate to have both Kate and Olivia working with us virtually. We've got maybe 10 students who are very interested in learning. And I've learned things about team racing that I certainly could never have coached last year because I've never done it. And we just didn't have a source of information on it. And it's been, I think, very eye-opening for a lot of the kids on our team. And it's been great to have both Kate and Olivia be able to tell us the differences between the club team and the varsity teams. And it's really been a good experience to have this. We were forced into doing this all virtually, but it has in fact been really interesting and educational. So thanks, Kate and Olivia.
Yeah. Shout out to our panelists here. And speaking of our panelists, I'm wondering if you guys have questions for each other. Any content I might have missed that you wanna ask your friends here?
I had
All right.
one question I wanted to ask. Kate, you were talking about tryouts. What do tryouts look like? Is it kind of just a practice and then you're involved in it, or is it, I don't know, what's that look like?
So a lot of the times for Hobart, it kind of depends on the year because my coach kind of switches off heavy recruiting every other year. So like when I was a freshman, we had I think 20 kids trying out for the team, and then he cut I want to say 6 of us, I'm pretty sure. So pretty much so it depends on how many people you get to come to tryouts, and then it'll usually maybe be a few races the first day just to kind of gauge your skill level, and if you are a kid that's just had one maybe summer of a random YMCA summer camp, or if you have been competitively sailing or not, kind of rooting that out. And then the next couple days he'll throw you in with maybe a more experienced crew or skipper, and then you're kind of trying out for them as well as the coach, if that makes sense. And he'll throw you into drills with different groups on the team. He'll throw you in with the highest level group on our team, and maybe our team race squad, and see how you do. And so we usually do about a week of tryouts, and then at the end of that week, he'll cut a certain amount of people, however many we have room for on the team. So Mhm.
Was it daunting? Were you scared when you came into it and then your mind was eased afterwards, or what?
Yeah, like I said before, I think it was like a little bit of a culture shock because like when I got there, all the freshmen were from the East Coast except for me. And so they've all kind of been sailing against each other, kind of like how you get to know people in the Midwest sailing against them in the summer. It's like the same thing with them. They all knew each other and they knew all of their results and everything like that. And then it was like, oh, they don't know who like Kate Cox, who sailed X-boats, is, and they don't know what an X-boat is. So that was a little nerve-wracking, but I think that I kind of gained my confidence through knowing that I maybe have like a better work ethic than some people on the team and would be able to prove that I can like add to the team. So I think it was a little intimidating at first, but kind of you know you go out and you go sailing, which is what you know how to do. So it became a little more comfortable.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, Kate, didn't you say that they even cut some people who had been on the team the year before because you had such a big group of freshmen coming in?
Yeah, so yeah, my freshman class was really strong when all of us came in. It was kind of like the most heavy recruiting he had done in years. So in order to make room for more people in my class, he had to cut like I think some juniors and even some seniors from my team, which doesn't usually happen, but sometimes does. So yeah, it just depends on the year and who my coach thinks is going to make the best fit and make the team better as a whole.
And do you think that you could beat Eddie in a 420 race?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, without a doubt. Yeah.
Cool.
I don't know if you've seen him lately, but yeah, I think I could.
I'm in Florida. Not too long ago.
Yeah, maybe not a Melgus 14, but a 420. Yeah, I think so.
Right on.
Yeah.
I think our next panel could be Kate and Eddie talking about how this hypothetical race would go.
Yeah.
That'd be
So,
fun. I'd
okay,
be down
but-
for that. Yeah.
I have another question. For those of you who are graduating this year, Kate and Olivia, for sure, how are you looking at what comes next? What do you do with that knowledge that you gained sailing collegiate 420s, and where do you go with that?
I think that on like every job interview I go on, I talk about sailing because I like can't peel away from it. And it's more just about like the leadership skills I've learned and what I've learned about being part of a team, especially a club run team, and what it means to work hard and be determined and passionate about something. And I think that those are like really like good like soft life skills that come in handy with whatever you do, especially when you're like gonna work even if you're gonna like have a job in high school, like at the grocery store, knowing like about work ethic and what it takes to like set a goal and accomplish it is, I think, something that is really important in college sailing and something you learn about every single time you head out on the water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think and one thing that Olivia and I have kind of talked about in our White Bear virtual talks is it really taught both of us how to be disciplined and come together with our teammates towards a goal that we all want to achieve, and holding people accountable and holding yourself accountable, I think. And like Olivia said, like the leadership skills, I was the captain this year, so that too, I think. And that's something I think we want to instill to our high school sailors like in the future, and have tried to through these virtual talks, is everything we've learned on our college teams.
Other than that, e-boats, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay. Or maybe everybody's gonna have to sail MCs this year. MCs and lasers. Unless
Yeah.
you can put your whole crew together out of your household.
Yeah.
You might be able to manage that, Kate.
Yeah, Emily and I, not Ed. I don't think Ed will not be my crew, but Emily for sure.
Back to you, Alec.
Sure, and I really like that note of kind of looking towards the future, and so maybe that's kind of a good note to wrap up on here. And looking towards the future, we want to kind of take care of our high school sailors in this time, and so one thing we'll be doing is just putting together a list of contact information for all of our panelists here. So if any panelists are okay and comfortable with sharing their emails, I'll probably be passing that along to respective directors, and maybe they can communicate with you. But to me, getting contact information to high school sailors, that if they are interested in a specific school or if they connected with a specific panelist, so that we can keep this dialogue going, I think that would be really cool to do. And then let's see. As I mentioned, we recorded this to YouTube Live, so feel free. I know some of you are coaches. Feel free to send this out to teammates that might have missed this, and hopefully this can be a good resource for kids this spring. So with that, I want to thank all of my panelists for joining me here. I want to thank Karen and Ted for hanging out, and Ian for helping out as well. And I appreciate all of the students that showed up. So students, as you log off, maybe you could just give a shout out thank you to our panelists here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Maybe the panelists could sing their fight song from their college. No, I'm just kidding. Go Madison. Woo!
Yeah.
Lucky.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Awesome.
everyone. I'll see you later.
Yeah, thank you guys. Have a good night.
Yeah, thanks, panelists. That was awesome. Good to see you guys virtually.
Thank you.
Bye.